Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two Jiujiteiras. I'm Babs,
I'm Katie.
and today we have a special guest, Coach Mike Meahan.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Very excited. Just before we begin and get into the nitty gritty, just wanted to kind of intro Coach Meahan. He comes to us with over 15 years of jiu-jitsu experience. You started under John Kelly. and and then of course we'll just give a little bit of the lineage there. So John Kelly then came under Sia Palista with Edgard Luque and Max Trombini, which eventually Max Trombini created MXT, and then we've been basically under that banner ever since, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's it.
You've also competed internationally as well as locally.
Yeah, a little bit, not a lot, but
Yeah. Yep. But I mean, IBJJF World Masters and the Grapplers Quest World Series of Grappling, like that's no small small thing.
long time ago. Good experience. But,
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, I guess, your journey towards coming into becoming a coach.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally I got into this with John. So John had started a program out in KV Golden Gloves with Tim Hayes, and it was kind of an intro-based thing to see if people were interested in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which at that time MMA was kind of on the rise, and a lot of people associated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with MMA. And I was out there training boxing. I also had my son out there doing a toddler program. And so Tim said to me, "Would you like to get into try this class with my friend John?" And I said, "Sure." So I signed up, and anyway, it was great. It was like maybe a 10-week program or 12-week program, and then it started off with a good bunch of people, and then by the end of it, we were down to like a handful of people, or not too many, right? There wasn't a lot left, but the crew that stayed there and liked it really liked it. So I just carried on training with John and some others there, and then Edgard came into play, and he was in town teaching judo, and or Mukto teaching judo, so he was teaching that, and then also coming and teaching jiu-jitsu a couple days a week. So that was pretty cool to have a jiu-jitsu black belt there. And obviously John just setting the tone. I think he was a blue belt at the time, and teaching us what he knew, and what he knew was fantastic for me, because like I came from a background, like I did mostly striking type martial arts and striking type sports, and John basically kicked my on the ground. I had no idea what was going on, but I said to myself, okay, you're missing something here in the toolbox. Like and it was very challenging, very, like, I was exhausted. I just remember driving home from KV those first few weeks, just with my head hanging out the window, being like, don't throw up, don't throw up. So it was just overwhelming, but it was such a challenge that I'm like, and at that time, I really needed something in my life. So something like that. And it was a really cool turn of events. So I started there. Eventually, John had moved into the city, and I followed John there. And we trained out at Bayside Drive at the old JBK Taekwondo Club. And when I got my blue belt out in KV, but when we moved into Bayside Drive, I started coaching. John had a youth program. It wasn't really big at the time, but John was very busy too at the time, I remember. And so I had just kind of jumped in and started helping. And then John asked, would you like to coach the kids? And I said, sure. So I started doing that. And I just kind of went from there. So I started coaching the kids, and then I would, started, the odd adult class I would fill in. And I just, I had coached other sports and so on in the past, and kind of always had a really, passion for coaching and working with people. So it just kind of worked, and yeah, it just, the relationship grew from there. And John just carried on with the Sia Palista lineage. We did had kind of a division at one time where some folks went and trained somewhere else, and then I stayed with John, and then John obviously went under Max when Max parted ways with Sia Palista and became MXT. So I stayed on with that as well, and then yeah, so I moving forward, we went to Westmoreland Road, and I continued to help teach a couple classes here, and help out when I could. And I should mention too, I did end up going away for probably 9 or 10 months. I had to go out west for work, and I would just get home every 6 or 7 weeks. So I would come home and train, and I was fortunate enough to help out a little bit when I was out west too, with the team that I was training with out there. Great bunch of people, and yeah. So when I came back full time to St. John, I kind of just jumped back into coaching. I did like a Saturday class, and I would coach for John when he was absent, and obviously helping out with the kids again and that type of thing. And so it was great, and that's kind of what started me on my path to coaching jujitsu. And from there, obviously now we have our location on the west side, and that's kind of my thing over there. And yeah, so
Girl.
that's kind of the history.
And what year was it? Do you remember when you got your black belt?
I think it was 2019.
2019. Okay.
Pretty sure. Yeah.
It all kind of blends together, I'm sure.
I honestly, like when you asked me, because I'm like, how long have I been training? Probably 14, 15 years. I can't recall exactly, but around that. And then, because I can't, like, you're right. You do this stuff for so long, and you do so many things. You spend so many hours on the mats that everything just kind of, you think about the old days, right? And you're
Right.
like, I remember what we did, but don't ask me a date because I'll never be able to tell you. So yeah, so that was about 2019 when I got my black.
Okay.
Mm.
And then your first degree was a few years after that?
Yeah. So first degree was it's 3 years after you get your black belt,
Okay.
then you get your first degree. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, because you're one of the original, as they say, OG.
Yeah. Yeah, in this city for sure. Yeah, so I was very fortunate. Like, we kind of get in on the ground level of BJJ here, thanks to John and Dave McElduff and a few other guys. And I was fortunate enough to just stick with that crew, and then obviously Pat Foley, and there
Yeah.
were some other folks that were around, and Josh Blanchard, and so some guys that recently got promoted to black belt. Those guys would come out and hang out once in a while. I remember those guys coming out to train a little bit after I started, maybe a year or two later. But yeah, so I mean, it was good. There was a good crew of core folks that always kind of stuck with it, and I was fortunate to be part of that crew.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's cool to see that bond. Dave just got his first degree, I think, just recently. Yeah. But it's kind of neat as everyone's growing, like you've got that kind of that community of people where
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing. Thank you so much. And I mean, the big topic today, what's a lot of people struggle with as one of the main topics was mental health in jiu-jitsu, as well as personal injury. Like that's a few things that are very important, and we kind of will all encounter, really. So yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
My journey, yeah. So back when I first got into jiu-jitsu, I had started training. I trained boxing off and on for years. Never competed, but I always trained because I played hockey and I worked as a doorman at different bars for many years. And I always trying to keep fit and just be prepared. And boxing is great. I love boxing. I still love boxing. But so I was out training boxing with Tim a little bit, and again my son was going out there, and then I started at that time I was two small children. One was barely, out of the womb, and then Mickey was just, 2 years old running around, and so both of my kids. I was a young, we were a young family. I was working two jobs. I was also involved with a union in a unionized position at a young age. So I was like a president of a local union. So I had a lot of stuff on my plate. Plus, trying to balance a family life. And what I found was for years, I would kind of struggle with, feeling down and out, and, to the point where some days I would spend entire weekends in bed. It was really tough, so, and, when I look back on it now, it was like, I always try to bury things down, and, I was like, yeah, I'm better than this. I'm tougher. I can hack this. I'll get through this. But, eventually it just came to a point where I wasn't being any good to myself, and more importantly to my family, wasn't being the best version of myself. So I went to my doctor, and around 2008 or 9, whatever it was, and I got diagnosed with depression, anxiety disorder. Like, most very common now. A lot of people have it, but it really put things in perspective for me to kind of understand why I was feeling like that. And of course, I was embarrassed and I was ashamed, and like, I'm a big, strong guy, and I can handle anything, right? But when it comes to mental health, I think that it's very important that we understand that sometimes things are not in our control, right? And we have to kind of, if we need help, we need to seek help. So when I finally got diagnosed, one of the things my doctor said to me was like, Mike, you should really try to find something for yourself that helps to, make you feel good or challenge you, or do something like for yourself, though, like not necessarily that impacts anybody else at the time. Just do something. So that's kind of around the same time I found jujitsu. And the nice thing with jujitsu was that it was so difficult and so hard. I didn't have as much time to continue to let that hamster spin on the wheel and continue to go down those rabbit holes of, of the depression and anxiety type stuff. So it started there. And then, over time, I found that jujitsu just really helped me stay in the moment and really, focus on myself. And I slowly started getting better. Obviously, there was other things. I was taking treatment, doing different things. It wasn't just jujitsu, but jujitsu was certainly probably the biggest catalyst for me in terms of dealing with that particular ailment. And excuse me. And so I was very thankful that I was doing the training the way I was, and I had that outlet, and it really helped put things in perspective for me, and it really helped me deal with my mental health issue. And I never talked about it for quite a few years, and then I found maybe over the last decade or so I've been a lot more open about it, because I think it's important for people to understand that there, as much as there used to be a stigma on it around that type of an issue, there's not anymore, and people need to stick together and bond together. And if I can provide any advice towards something like, to helping people with that, and I'm going to do it. So yeah, so I guess, from a long-winded answer, jujitsu really helped me start dealing with my mental health issues.
It's wild. When I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, I couldn't go into a grocery store. Like, the idea of encountering people, the anxiety I had was just so huge. But I never missed a jiu-jitsu class. It was like, there's something about, like you said, going on the mats, and it just shuts everything else off. And I was able to go into class, and it was like finally able just to stop those, those thoughts from going. And I mean, you're so focused on what's happening in the moment on the mats that you don't have time to have all those intrusive thoughts and things like that. So it really does play a huge role in kind of just shutting it off for a while.
100%, Kate. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see the science behind that. I'm sure there's plenty of research articles out there, but like chemically what it's doing, because that's the thing that I hear most often is I've experienced it for the short period of time I've been doing jiu-jitsu, is an actual break. Like I feel like I've got, multiple tabs open constantly, and it's like, what did I say today? What didn't I say today? What do I have to do? All of these things. And, if you can just get there, that all just kind of just stops.
You're right. I mean, it's like a reset, right? You get to the gym, and then as you're training, you're trying to focus on breathing so that, you could stay with it. You're not totally gassed out. You're dealing with, when you're rolling, somebody trying to submit you or put you in terrible positions. And it's, so you're dealing with all these other factors that really, if you don't think about those fully, you're in some trouble.
Right.
So you don't really have much choice, which is a cool thing. But I think also, as well, to your point on the science behind it, obviously it's got to do something for the endorphins and and all that and all those things as well too. And no, so it's a very cool tool to use for people that are willing to try it and to accept the difficulties of it, because it's a very, and Kate, obviously, you being in the position you are with your diagnosis, you see the benefits firsthand, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was funny because when I first started treatment for my PTSD, it was like, I'd have to have like a grocery list, and I have to go and get the groceries, and then I have to make a recipe or whatever. It was like very simple tasks, but it seemed so hard. And it was like, okay, jiu-jitsu, I have to go. And I think it was just like such a reward feeling going to class, because it was a group of people that I knew cared about me, without like going in and like people being like, how are you? But like, you just knew that those people cared about you. And, and it was just the physical activity, shutting off all of the thoughts for a little bit, and you felt like $1 million going home. So
that's great.
Yeah, it was big. I think with my yoga teacher training, when they talked about mental health and yoga, one of the things they were saying too was like just a fight, flight, freeze. So if it's someone who's in a flight or a freeze response, you want to try and get them to do more yoga that's active, like a lot of big movements, like standing postures and like flows and stuff. And if it's someone in a flight type of response, you want to try and do more grounding postures. So I don't know if that kind of translates at all with jiu-jitsu or not, but you'd think, and you touched on the breathing aspect of it too, like that directly affects your nervous system. So there's probably some connection there when you think about the science.
Yeah, whether shutting off certain things or restarting others, like that, all the chemicals running through our neuroreceptors, right?
Yeah.
Which would be kind of cool. But I guess for when I think about myself, because I like, PTSD and those things, like I haven't had any significant diagnosis, but I have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
So in your years of coaching, and I have to say as testimonial as a student under you, I mean, it's a very welcoming club. You're there to help everybody. Your passion for coaching really, really stands out, like your values, and you see it in, all the people that come into the club, which I think is absolutely amazing because
thank you.
It's for me, sometimes the anxiety is so much to even actually get there, even though logically everything's fine, everybody's kind, we're there to learn, but it's still that inner talk that can sometimes stop me from getting in there. Have you any advice to people like me?
100%. I mean, no, like, and again, I do have anxiety, and I worked with lots of people that, have anxiety. So it's very much a real thing in terms of taking that first step to get into the gym, right? And that could be even if you've already been training for a while, right? Like you're saying, and then 2 years in, you're still having trouble some months to get, okay, I'm going Monday and Wednesday, or Wednesday comes along, I hit Monday, but I'm like, then the anxiety starts coming into play, and your mind starts racing, right?
Yeah.
You have 100 things going through your head, and so I think it just comes down to kind of simplifying it a little bit in terms of, okay, what am I really trying to do here? If I don't go to jujitsu when I know it's good for me, like what's that going to do for my anxiety, right? With the fact of anxiety being such a tricky thing to deal with, I kind of put it back on that, like, what am I actually trying to do for myself here? Am I trying to get better, or do I just want to live with this anxiety that sometimes gets the better of me, or do I face this challenge head on? And is jujitsu a way to do that? Because jujitsu gets you on the mat, it puts you in a very demanding place, right? Physically and mentally. And, knowing that triggers the anxiety, right? But if I didn't do that, where would I be?
Right.
Right. So it's a little bit of a struggle in the beginning, but once you figure it out and you put it in the context, okay, I'm trying to do this for, I like jujitsu, or I love jujitsu, and I want to be better, and I know this is better for me. So if I break it down that way and I kind of talk to myself that way, it sometimes helps drown out those, 100 other things going through when I'm thinking about, many different things with the anxiety that kind of rises up. So I kind of just focus back inwards, and that's kind of what I tell people. And I find it's helped,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know a couple of things that I've tried was, you get home and that's when it's like, you've had your busy day, you have all these things because right now, Christopher and I have a young family and all these other things on the go. And then all of a sudden my mind starts negotiating. And the days that have been successful when the anxiety's high is if I've put out my gear, so I'm looking at it, I get home and I don't sit down. I don't stop. Great. It's like doing the suppers, getting the kids ready, kind of standing and playing, and not allowing myself to sit into the couch and go, yeah, I don't have to go tonight.
And that's awesome advice. Because, I mean, seriously, for somebody that deals with that, perfect way to do it, right? You got to find out what works for you, because there's not any single thing I think that works for everybody. I think everybody's individualized to a degree, so that you're going to need to figure out what works for you. And if that's the recipe for you, then keep doing it. And obviously, I think that's a beneficial thing for a lot of other people to hear as well. So
yeah. Or having a partner that's
accountability buddy.
Yeah. It's
100%. That's great.
It's great. You can not be 100%, but will you be there for me so that we can go and we'll just give it the best we have that night. Yeah. And those are sometimes your best nights on the mats,
Yeah. I had that. Well, yeah, because you're one of my accountability buddies. And the nights that you're at the other club, I had Andrea, my girlfriend that also goes to our club. And there was one night where I was like, I wonder if I can twist her arm because I feel tired. And she was like, oh, I'm going. I'm like, I'm going. I'll be there. I've said I was going to go. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
But my mental capacity. But again, it's that tug of war where it's going to be beneficial. And it's good to think about that. What is it I'm trying to do? Because everybody starts jujitsu for a different reason. Yeah. And mine was to learn a new language, to get my body in shape in a manner that was more meaningful, that was going to add value to my life versus nothing wrong with the gym, but it was just like the same thing over and over again. Like obviously having that incorporated, but doing something that added a lot more
that's wonderful.
complexity to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And being part of the wonderful community that
100%.
I've watched my husband be a part of all these years. So
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it's great. And and obviously, Chris being there as well too. I mean, he's been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And great guy, great student, and obviously doing a ton for the community. So you guys have all kind of come together as a team now, and it's really awesome to see how you've grown together, and you're doing things like this now too. So it's pretty awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, having you and John really at the helm, I know there's so many other people involved, but just really like what you both have embodied all these years for the community. I mean, that's kind of where we all kind of aspire to be. So it's it's wonderful. But yeah. So I guess along with mental health, like especially making the move to move over west to kind of create like any hurdles or things that, if there's someone out there that is very experienced and wants to look at opening their own club or expanding, like,
Well, the biggest thing you should do is talk to your coach first.
yeah.
So,
Fair.
I mean, John, we were just in a position where, I believe Corey Forsyth had just opened up a place in Sussex. The Westmoreland gym was very busy, and it was at the point where, John and I had talked about it, even I think as far back as the JVK club, about potentially expanding it at some point in time, if the need was there, and obviously the need was there. The timing was not ideal for me, to be quite honest. I had a lot going on, and I had been a couple years into a new career and super busy job. But sometimes you have to strike when the iron's hot, and so we just kind of, said, okay, let's, this should be cool. Let's make it happen. So I started off with a small little space, and yeah, the rest is history. And so yeah, if you're in that position, and you are part of a team that is looking to, maybe expand a little bit, certainly there's a lot of work that has to go into it. It's location, it's all the logistics that come into starting a club, right? So obviously it's a big investment. So I had to put all my own time and money and energy into securing a space, outfitting the space, and then trying to keep a regular program going, which I've been fortunate enough to do, which is great. But it's still one of those things that takes constant work, and you're still trying to make it the best environment or the best training that you can for people, and that takes a lot of work. So if you are going to do this, it's a big commitment, and you've got to stay steady on what your goals and your goals are, essentially, in terms of like, what do I want to do for this community, what do I want to do for my students, and you have to keep that on the forefront. For me, it's always been about the students. It's not so much about my gym, or it doesn't really matter. I could teach out of the back of a high school if I had to. It wouldn't matter. It's just about what can I do to provide these folks something that they need, or something that they get benefit from through jiu-jitsu. That's what it comes down to.
I've started training at your club on Tuesdays with Jill, and I can definitely see that atmosphere and that culture that you have at your club, and it's really nice.
Thanks, Keith.
Yeah. I think that's a huge component for me, and especially we're talking about mental health. There's different sites and stuff that I follow on Facebook and places like that, and there are clubs that don't have that side of things. So like where it isn't necessarily good for mental health, or there's a lot of egos, or like a bro type culture. So it's nice to see that you definitely cultivate like a really healthy training environment.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Yeah. Sorry. Questions.
That's good. Keep coming.
I guess for your experience with like mental health along the way, and the people, like, I know you're saying like a lot of it's stigmatized, and people need to talk about it more. Have you encountered like some like pushback in the community as you were kind of going through these kind of hurdles and trying to?
Not really, not directly. I mean, I've overheard conversations about people maybe making assumptions about people and so on, but nothing directly towards me. I've been fortunate enough that I think people know me, know my character, or the people that do know me know my character, and know that what I'm saying is I'm saying it out of honesty and out of wanting people to actually help themselves through my story. So I've never really faced anything like that, but obviously there's still a little bit there. And I think some people just maybe, they have the premise that perhaps, mental health is not real. Like these issues aren't real. Unfortunately, they are real. It's significant as much as a physical limitation or injury is. And so, I think that, I think the more that we talk about these things, the more acceptance you see out of it. And I think we're at a place now in this day and age that with everything going on in the world, I mean, mental health is just one of those things that has become standardized. Like people understand that this is an issue. And when you look at our province and you look at, the issues surrounding mental health, it's a huge ordeal, right? And hopefully we can get a handle on it as a society and culture, and our government can continue to put us, well, they need to put more resources into it, quite frankly, but I think it's one of those things that's become an accepted issue that we really need to start looking after.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. They do need to have more resources and access to mental health services. That's a huge, where I work in nonprofit, that is a huge barrier for a lot of people, and, only getting a minimum of like 2 to 3 sessions. And it's like, you just get comfortable if you can find someone available and then being able to talk to someone. So having those like alternatives on top of, something for your body as well as your mind.
100%.
In law enforcement, I will say the stigma is still very much there.
Yeah.
Very much there. It was challenging for me. I switched careers and stayed within the law enforcement field, but there's a lot of people who still feel that, like PTSD, you're too weak, you're wimp, and that kind of thing. So it's challenging to. I do talk about it, but there's times where I'm uncomfortable talking about it just because it's not always met with kindness or
I can appreciate that. Yeah. It's a great thing that you're doing it. I mean, for sure, because it's so important for people to understand, like, especially in that line of work. I mean, like what you folks have to deal with is, it's a lot, and you see a lot, you deal with a lot of things that the average person doesn't necessarily deal with. So yeah, I think that's a great thing that you're speaking about.
Thank you. I for a long time, I think it probably first started to show for me in my sleep patterns. Like I wasn't sleeping at night. I was having a lot of those intrusive thoughts where I just couldn't get to sleep. And I think family and friends saw it in me a lot sooner than I started to recognize, like, okay, there's something wrong. But it's funny because you kind of think, I had always thought of PTSD as like this certain thing or like these certain traits. And then mine was mainly sleep, and like I just didn't have any focus. I couldn't keep focus. Like I would turn water on to go and do dishes and then walk away, and I'd be sitting in the living room like, why is the water running? And those sorts of things. Very frustrating type of injury to have. My ability to remember things, especially people's names, was so hard. And people think you're being ungenuine, like not genuine, or you're not, and so it was a very difficult thing to go through. And I've noticed you really have to celebrate the successes. Like when you start to recognize that you had this issue and you start to work on getting better, which was a huge amount of work, like a lot went into it. But you have to really celebrate those little triumphs.
100%.
Yeah, it's the same with jiu-jitsu. Like when you first start jiu-jitsu and you're just struggling just to keep guard or like keep or pass guard, and those little successes, it's kind of the same with mental health. Like there's good days and there's bad, but you really have to, the days that are good, like own them, celebrate, be happy.
Yeah. And I think it's that constant. And you said it right. Like it's a constant battle. Like it doesn't end.
No,
it doesn't end. But it's one of those things that becomes manageable over time. And you do have your good days and your bad days. But if you have something that's constant, that's a constant catalyst as well, like jiu-jitsu, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Right? So cool.
I think so.
Well, that's actually a good lead into kind of resiliency. Again, because and you guys could both speak to this, because again, my journey's been a little bit shorter. But how did you find that as hurdles, whether it was internally within the jiu-jitsu community or externally, like in your life, how did you find jiu-jitsu kind of built up that mental resiliency? Did you ever like kind of look back and go, you know what, this would have been me 5 years ago, I would have reacted this way. But now that I've been doing this and practicing, like I've kind of moved quicker through it.
Yeah, for me personally, I can see some there. Like, so resiliency, I've always been a stubborn guy. So if you put me in a corner, you bet like I'm okay, let's rock and roll, So I have that kind of mentality anyway. I've always kind of felt like I was an underdog and faced a lot of adversity through my youth and into adulthood. And I think we still do to a degree, but so I always just kind of bit down and would just kind of push through most things. So I always had that kind of attitude anyway, up until I hit that wall with the mental health stuff. And so then it becomes a matter of, just really trying to understand yourself, how you work, how you operate, and then looking at what, as far as resiliency and mental fortitude. Okay, how do I do this on a level that it's not just about jujitsu, but it's also about everyday life, right? And how does that work together? And for me, jujitsu was my thing, right? So when I needed that outlet, jujitsu became my thing, which obviously kind of helped correlate all the other benefits, the mental fortitude, the resiliency, and so on, right? And then seeing that as I coached over the years and watching students come through the door, or even youth, I know some students and some I know very well, like my son, for example, Mick, he is a tremendous athlete. You guys know Mick, he's a
Amazing.
really hardworking kid. And, but he again, he, when he was young, he was a little shy and so on. And now you can see like he's a very, I'm very proud of him, obviously. And my daughter Piper as well, too, the way they carry themselves, the way they interact with people, the way they, just in general as people. I think that I noticed, them as youngsters coming on the mats with me at such a young age, seeing them develop the resiliency or mental fortitude through training jujitsu and seeing that transfer over to their everyday lives, right? Be it at school or other sports or what have you. And it's a really cool thing to see. So that there's a really direct correlation when you can see that. And from a personal perspective as well, too. Absolutely. The the years of training, the years of just the constant grind, so to speak, through whether it's mental issues you're having or physical issues or just the general the grind of hard training or just constant training. You have to be resilient, right? You have to put yourself in that position to just say, I might not want to do it, but I'm going to do it because I know what it does for me personally, right?
Yeah.
I think jiu-jitsu built up my confidence so much. So I was training before I was diagnosed and before I really started to see any effects of PTSD. So just the confidence that it gave me was like, all right, I saw it more as like a kind of similar in that it was a challenge that I would have to overcome. But it's funny because without that, I don't know how well I would have done to get through all of it, because there's so many people, like when I talk about people, that stigma, there are so many people out there that want to tear other people down.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild because, and I think when we talk about the gym culture and the atmosphere that you create, like I've never gone into jiu-jitsu and felt like there were people there that were like, she sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the people there are there and they're trying to help everybody get better. And I feel like the people that I train with are so proud of me and they're so happy to see all my successes. And when I don't do well, because I've competed and I've not done well, they're like, all right, we're going to work on it. We're going to get you better. In law enforcement, I haven't had that same experience. Some people, but for the most part, it's just such a like cutthroat type environment. So jiu-jitsu's really kind of built my confidence to go into work and be like, yeah, okay, like, I can
get through this.
Yeah, I can get through this. And it's funny because there was a fella the other day that was pointing out my losses that I work with. It's always someone who's very out of shape and
doesn't know the grind or
right.
the toll that it actually takes to actually even step on the mat
exactly
to compete, let alone have a successful venture when you do that, right?
Yeah. So I come home and I told Patrick about it. I was like, can you believe this guy? And he's like, it was just like, and it didn't tear me down at all,
Right.
because I'm proud just the fact that I was able to overcome the nervousness of going in and trying a super fight. Like I've literally got a complex PTSD diagnosis, and I'm going on camera to yeah, I think I was proud of the fact that I challenged myself and went through that. But yeah, it's funny because jiu-jitsu is just, I'm like, my head's just exploding. Like I'm not, I'm not an egotistical person, but I do have confidence. Like I'm very confident.
You should be.
Just from the way it's just from my gym, like lifting me up and like building that. So
that's awesome. And I mean, it is hard because, a lot of these folks that kind of generalize jiu-jitsu. Oh, okay, you lost your last 4 matches. Okay, how many matches have you lost?
Yeah, right. So, and it's funny because it is the person who's not challenging himself or that hasn't put themselves out there.
So you've got all these other things going on, and then you decide to push yourself even further by taking a competition, which is stressful. It takes so much work to prepare for. Competition is tough. Like that's another level to, for some people, it's just, I gotta, like Jill, I gotta get my butt to jiu-jitsu and just get on the mats, right? And that's hard. Yeah. That's not easy, right? And for some, and then if you are going to compete, that's a whole other dynamic, right? It's a whole extra level of pressure. And, even though for me, I mean, I always, I tell people like, compete, don't compete, it's up to you. You get what you want out of jiu-jitsu, right? But for somebody like you, Katie, obviously it was a challenge, so it's putting you in another position to further expand yourself, your resiliency, etc. So I think it's a cool thing, and it's tough. Like I look at all these guys that compete for years and nobody really knows, guys and girls that compete, nobody really knows, like, unless you've actually stepped on those mats to go out there, what that feeling is like. And I certainly haven't done it a ton. Like there's people that have, like Mickey's competed 3 times the amount that I ever did, but I look at Joe Pilmers and these guys that are just constant, that did it all the time. And even Professor Kelly, who's still going at it, it's not an easy thing, but if it's something that you like and it does something for you, why not, right? And if you had the opportunity like that, win, lose, or draw, it doesn't really matter. This is jiu-jitsu, right? Like you're not competing for $100,000 and your life's not on the line, right? So if you lose, you lose. It's not a big deal. I mean, I think that's something that people have to kind of get over, judging themselves based on wins, losses. Like that's not the whole deal here. I mean, I got my butt kicked many times in tournaments, but do I feel confident enough that if I had to do something on the street? Absolutely, 100%, because jiu-jitsu is just an element of all that stuff, right? Like it's not a, so it's like, jiu-jitsu is, competition is wonderful. It's another level of taking that resiliency test to the next level. And if you can do that, I get all the respect in the world for you,
And you never know who you're going to inspire too, because I always said, I'm never competing, but after watching you, I'm like, maybe before I'm 50.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
It went from like a hard note to I'll think about it as I go further on. Yeah. And I mean,
it's an eye opener, right?
Right. There are many of me out there that would be like, huh.
I really enjoyed competing, and I'll probably continue to challenge myself in that way. But I look at it as like there's a 50-50 chance you're either going to win or lose. There's 2 people in a jiu-jitsu competition, like competing against each other.
Well, what's the guarantee?
Yeah,
the
and
then is you're gonna learn something.
Yeah,
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Learn something about yourself. Learn something about, if you're a competition based person and you really like that and that's your sport, you're gonna learn, what do I need to work on next? But it comes down to you're learning something about yourself and where you're at. Right?
Yeah. And I'm always incredibly, as in a women's category, to go and compete. I'm just so proud of anybody that goes out and challenges themselves in that way.
You guys are, and the talent pool out there now in these competitions, like I was up coaching Tori a couple weeks ago up at Breakthrough. They had a tournament. Did a great job. And Tori being 3 years in,
she's a beast.
It's real, right? I mean, the dedication and the level of commitment that she puts into preparing herself for, and she loves competitions. Like that is her jam right now. I think the kid's going to do great things no matter what she does in life. Yeah. But right now it's just, she's putting so much into that. But to see folks like yourself, Katie, and Tori, there's such a high level.
Madeline, Sarah.
I mean, these
Hajenza. There's so many amazing females that are coming into the light.
Really and truly, I was so impressed. And every time I go to a tournament, I'm super impressed by the level of talent. But obviously, to see the females being, such a small group, and now they're expanding, and to see the talent pool getting bigger and bigger, Tally,
Yeah.
these people are, they're
Yeah.
legit as legit comes, and it's really cool to see. And obviously, again, the competition scene being what it is here in the Maritimes now is it's off the hook. It's come so far, and the talent, the teams and the competitors and the coaching, like it's very from say when I first competed, till now, it's like it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's night and day, right? So it's
Very
really cool
cool.
to see. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I do this every time. Jill's like, Katie, please don't. But for Jill and like the people who are out there and creating and doing like the grappling tournaments and stuff, like
Oh,
Rogue, like you guys are making a name for the sport. Like it's a huge thing.
Rogue,
Like it's really cool.
and I say this to Jill and Chris and
She's like,
Josh and Amanda all the time, but it's like, honestly, I've been around in a lot of tournaments, and there's not, I find Rogue is always, maybe I am a little biased here, but it's certainly the most well-run tournament. Like just to see like the investment in some of the different platforms and stuff that you use, and just the organization. You guys hit it out of the park every time that you have a
yeah,
host a tournament. So yeah, that's come so far as well too. So Rogue, grappling, breakthrough. I know there's Nova Scotia's got some stuff
Yeah.
going on. PEI. So there's so many different ones now. But yeah, tremendous job with the competition scene and providing those venues for people. So yeah, that's been a huge
I
help.
think the first competition that I knew of with jiu-jitsu, we had it at Tim Hayes'
Mhm.
gym with Edgeguard.
That's right. I
And
remember
like,
we hosted that. Yeah,
yeah,
that was probably like 2012, maybe
Oh wow.
yeah,
11, maybe.
like
That was the first one in
to
St.
see it
John.
go from, and that was awesome. I'm not
Yeah.
talking bad about it because it was great, but like to see the growth and like
Mm.
The evolution of it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
Like,
cool now. Yeah.
and I think like again, kind of set your ego at the door, and it's the same thing with running these events. It's about the community, and you're listening, and we're very fortunate to have a really good, smart, organized group of people like running the show, and but then listening to the people, like what is it that the community wants, and not saying I know what you need.
Mhm.
It's kind of like okay, like to make this work right as it evolves, just
yeah. Where did the idea to start Rogue come from?
Would have been Chris and Josh. That would have been
Yeah.
that would have been their thing, just going around and seeing what's available and just kind of like, you know what, we can make a go at this. And then, just I wasn't as involved in the beginning other than just like being at the events and helping set up and stuff. But like as it grew and then I got into jiu-jitsu, I was like, because every time we'd have an event, I'm like, I got to get to jiu-jitsu. I got to like start this. So it was one of those things that eventually, and same with Amanda too, right? Like she's been living and breathing this with Josh and, all the years he's been involved. And
that.
now, their kids are getting involved and it's just like, it's become all of our lives. So it's, yeah. So,
Very cool.
but yeah, it was the two of them just probably chatting away and being like, yeah, we can make a go at this.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So I guess the next thing leading into the topic of like physical injuries, because we talked a lot about resiliency and like mental health struggles and just kind of, the benefits that jiu-jitsu has. But the reality is whether you're someone that is, you do labor for a living, or if you don't and you get injuries, competitions, training, whatever, what are some advice or some things that maybe you've encountered over the years?
Well, I can speak firsthand. Like I've had a ton of injuries, and not necessarily from jujitsu. I've had some in jujitsu, but prior to jujitsu, I played lots of sports. I've done other, so I've had several like knee dislocations, both knees, shoulders, broken finger, you name it. There's been a lot of injuries that I've had to deal with over the course of my life thus far. But one of the things is that when you're dealing with a physical injury, it's not the end of the world, right? Like the hard part is that the physical injury does limit what you can actually do on the mats, and you have to be safe, otherwise you'll never heal, right?
Right.
But I'm a big believer in that there is something that you can do, right? So I always try to tell people, like, if you are injured or you're dealing with a condition, let's work around that. Let's try to get you in, because if you do benefit from jujitsu, if this is something that helps you with your life, then we can make this work regardless of what you're dealing with. I mean, obviously, if you're in traction, you're not
Yeah.
gonna, we'll put some videos in front of you, right? But I mean, as far as, I broke a finger, or, I separated my shoulder, there's different things that could happen. Like there's minor injuries and then you have major injuries. Minor injuries, we'll say like a sprained finger, or, broken toes, those things are fairly common, right? So, certainly they're not fun, but you can train around them pretty good. Yeah, right.
Tape them up a bit there.
Right. It's funny because my students, like, they'll see my right baby toe just like out of place sometimes, and it's like, oh, coach, what's going on? I don't even feel it anymore because it's happened so many times, right? So it's like, snap, okay, back in, and let's keep at it. So it's like you're dealing with that. And then you get into some more serious injuries that, like if you have a break or you have a dislocation, then you do have to be careful, right? You're not going to be able to jump right back on the mat, but you will be able to get back probably sooner than you think, to a degree. So, like, I think it comes down to, working, if you're working with a doctor, physiotherapist, something like that, kind of telling them what you do. And if you like jujitsu, okay, this is what we do. And then coming, talking to me and saying, okay, what can I do here, coach? And I'll say, okay, well, listen, first of all, you don't want to get re-injured. Where are you at now with the process of rehabilitation? And what can we put you in? Like, a lot of times for me, like, so I deal with multiple injuries, and I have a condition that I deal with physically as well. So there's times that I can't physically do stand up and do a hard round, because my back, my spine is so in such a place there. I have a big inflammation, or my knees, my joints, right? And so what I'll do is I'll say, okay, whoever, Raymond Rice, or somebody, like, okay, Ray, you're going to start on top. You're going to try to finish me, and I'm just going to try to defend, right? Because I know my mobility is limited. I can't do what I can do
Right.
normally. So Ray's working his techniques to try to get his finish. I'm working my techniques to just try and survive sometimes, because I can't obviously do maybe a ton of escapes, but I can do little things to kind of train myself to, keep my elbows tucked in, keep my chin tucked, change my posture here, do little things. So I think there's ways to do it depending on what you're dealing with. But certainly I don't think, when it comes to injuries, I think that, you have to be smart, but I don't think that you should just, I'm hurt, I'll see you in 6 months.
Right.
Right. Because then you start to lose, obviously you're not keeping up with the material that's being shared, but you lose connection with your club, with your friends. And then potentially, sometimes people just don't come back, right?
Mhm.
Because they get busy, tired. Then you see them a couple years later and they say, geez, I should never have left. I'm glad I'm back. I should never have left.
Yeah.
And you get into that whole routine. So I think there's always something that can be done. Sometimes it's just a matter of helping, like even if, Mick sprained his ankle a month ago. And so it's like, okay, what can he do? Well, can't do a ton, but he came in and helped coach, right?
Right.
So he helped coach and do things like that. And so, I think there is things that you can do for sure.
And I think you said it because obviously we are not doctors, so you want to listen to
Right.
the medical
Yeah.
advice. But if you're able to come in, one of the things you've said all the time is, even if you're hurt to the point where you can't do anything, come to class anyways. Like just
Yeah.
come in and take a look and
Maybe
watch,
take
and
some
you've got
notes.
questions, and exactly get some social media stuff.
Yeah, right. You guys
Take some
better
pictures.
than me. I'm terrible with that stuff. But yeah, exactly. There's always something that you can contribute, either, to the team, and basically to yourself, right? It's, if jujitsu is like your time for you, then don't stop because you're injured. Like, come to the gym, you know, do some mat exercises, some shrimp, some, you know what I mean? And if it becomes like, if you do have physical limitations, learn to train around them safely, and you'll still get some benefit from being there, right? You're not out of the game completely. You're still there, and you're still contributing to yourself and to the team.
Mhm. Epsom salts,
Yeah.
tape. I
Yeah.
don't recommend Advil and stuff too much because it's bad for your gut.
I don't take
But
Rollers.
Well, there's, so if you're training all the time, I mean, it all, like, the older I get, the biggest thing for me is recovery, right? And recovering properly. And I also, so I was telling you earlier, so I have a condition called ankylosing spondylitis, which is kind of an autoimmune / arthritic condition that affects your spine, your joints, some of your organs, and it causes inflammation. And so it's a real tricky progressive type disease. I got diagnosed in 2020, but I had been dealing with this stuff for 20 years, and it was just, I'd have lower back pain to the point where I'd have spasms. I couldn't get out of bed, and that obviously contributed to your mental health battle as well. Physical injuries do that.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a balance. And, but, so I would significantly have to change the way I train. And I do now that I'm older because I find that things have progressed. My joints are a lot worse than they were before. My spine is fairly good right now. But I didn't know what I was dealing with up until I think I did a podcast with Chris and Josh, and they were asking me, I was working with a physiotherapist at the time, and I was starting to get a little bit of relief, but couldn't figure it out, and then I got my diagnosis shortly thereafter because it was like I'd done massage, with Matt, and he was great, but my issue never went away.
Yeah.
So it was constantly there, and I would have these flare-ups. Now the flare-ups I find happen a little bit more frequently. I think it's just due to things maybe progressing a bit, but it's manageable. And so I have to do this a lot where I train differently. I'm training smarter, not necessarily as hard. Like I go to the gym, I lift like probably 4 to 5 days a week. I'll lift weights. Uh, I try to anyway,
Yeah.
like everybody else.
The dream.
I try to be as disciplined as I can, but I'm on the mats 5 or 6 days a week as well, right? So I'm getting a pretty good balance there, but I'm not 100% every time I go out there. Like tonight when we train, I will not be jumping in and doing 7, 8 rounds of stand up with throws and everything because I had a bit of a flare up last week, so I'll probably just start on my knees, play a little guard, and work hard from that position and try to get better at something that I'm not very good at, maybe from that position, right? So I think there's that aspect, training smarter if you do have an injury or you're dealing with a condition, and then the recovery is huge, right? You guys are talking foam rollers, stretching, um, hot tubs. I invested
Mm-hmm.
in a hot tub. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. But you got to find something that works for you and your body. And for me, it's always about trying to keep the inflammation down as much as I can, and then having maybe a little bit of therapeutic, just some little bit of therapeutic release. So I'm not constantly just dealing with that lower back pain or with my joint pains, right? So I find for me it's been hot and cold, ice when I'm done training, and then obviously with the hot tub, I'm fortunate enough I can jump in that, right? And some people don't have that, but a hot shower, hot bath,
Yeah.
Epsom
Mhm.
salts, like you said,
Yeah, I
Think
love.
that,
I buy them
like,
at Costco in bulk, and
right? Oh yeah.
yeah, that's true.
So
They've got a good.
yeah.
yeah, and there's not, and again, it's kind of individualized, right? It's like anything else. You'll find what works for you, and you just stick to it. But I think for people that are dealing with injuries or that have some sort of an ailment that continues to follow them, it's like, okay, recovery is huge,
Hmm.
and then other types of training maybe to support what I'm doing on the mats, be it strength and conditioning or yoga,
Yeah.
things like that, right?
The strength training is amazing. What, like, as I've heard so many people that have had, issues with their joints and things and neck and whatnot, and it's like, oh, I started lifting weights again, and
Mhm.
that's kind of cleared up a little bit, or is eased because
Right.
you're keeping your strength, like keeping all those muscles like moving and intact, and
Yes.
because that's my biggest thing. I do a lot of physio, but I know I need to get to the weight training again
Right.
because
Yeah.
I know I feel better.
Yeah. Well, you work with the right people, and then you find out the recipe that works for you,
Yep.
and you just stick with it, and it'll change over time based on
As we
whatever you
age,
right.
as
Didn't
we
want to
age,
say that.
the
But,
40 club.
yeah. Right. So yeah, I mean, it becomes a little bit more real. Like I know in the last year, I've noticed a big difference in myself in terms of what I could do in the past versus what I mean, I could still do it, but I think it comes down to what do I really need to be doing here for the long term? Because I want to be able to stay on the mats until, till I can't physically do it anymore. So God willing, that'll be my whole life. And so that's my goal is to keep myself there. And how can I do that physically and, and stay with it? So it's, it'll change over time, but it's doable, right?
But it's really good that you share that, because I think that's the biggest struggle as we age
Yeah.
is you tie that into the mental struggle of, well, I should be able to do this.
100%.
I should, like, and you're looking at the youngins and going
So-
and realizing, like, here's where I'm at. And again, what's your goal?
Yeah.
Is your goal to be like 80, 90 doing jujitsu? Then you've got to make some
You
changes.
got to you got to be smart, right? And it's sometimes a tough pill to swallow because mentally you're like, I can do this, right? But for me to go out and do, Joe Pilmer style training right now, no, like, not a chance, right? Like it's not going to happen. God love him. He's a fantastic athlete. So he can do it. I am not a fantastic athlete anymore, and I've come to grips with that. I'm cool with that, and I wouldn't say I was ever a fantastic athlete, I was a mediocre hockey player. And, I always put a lot into whatever I did. But I think it's okay to have some good self-realization too, and be like, of course we always have these little fantasies in the back of our head about, maybe, oh yeah, I'm gonna jump into the octagon or do the like that was when I first started, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I got to take a look at what I'm at realistically here, and what am I really trying to do, right?
Yep.
Because you can get swept away with the glory and all these different things that happen, but at the end of the day, it's all about what you are getting out of your training for yourself and how you're representing yourself and what things mean to you and your crew, so to speak, right? So all that stuff is great, and I think everybody will find their own path and have their own ambitions and so on. But I think at the end of the day, you have to be realistic with yourself to a degree as well too, right? And that's okay. And you can push yourself and you can grow and if I say, okay, I'm going back to doing World Masters next year, well, I can do that and I could put the time into doing it. And I'm not going to cut myself away from that. But I'm also going to say, like, I'm not going to go out and compete at, 15 tournaments this year. And it's just not going to happen for me personally. And I know there's probably many other people that feel that way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. And the reputation of the clubs too, like who you surround yourself with, that's also another hurdle to manage sometimes, depending on if you're like a training club or if you're a competition club, and then what's your personal journey in that? Like
Sure.
how do you
Yeah, and there
navigate?
you can see that there are some clubs that are very heavy on competition, which is cool, and their students are phenomenal. But again, I think it has to go back to what are you getting out of your jiu-jitsu journey, right?
Mhm.
Are you getting, is it because of mental health that I'm getting this? Is it the physical benefits? Is it the community? Like, what is it doing for you personally? And then spin that off into the other avenues. Like, maybe I'm a competitor and I'm doing it for this. Maybe I'm a law enforcement officer and I'm doing it because it does this for me, right? Maybe I'm a father or mother and I'm doing this because it does this for me, right? So there's all these different little eclectic avenues that you can get into, but it's the big thing is just realizing what jujitsu is doing for you personally.
I think that's a great way to describe it, because it is different for everyone. Like, there are people who want to compete at high level, and then
Mhm.
there's people who are just happy to make it to class, um, and you may not describe yourself as a fantastic athlete, but you're a fantastic coach.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting because even the physical injuries really do kind of play a role in the mental aspect. Like, one of the biggest fears I have with a physical injury is not being able to make it to the mats and not having that mental.
Therapy.
My therapy, mat therapy. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's kind of interesting. I think even with like major athletes, like for people who are like in the Olympics and things like that, they have like a therapist that is able to coach them through that kind of aspect of
Oh yeah.
training and things. If they're
Mental coaching. There's the science behind a lot of that it's very interesting. Like, I've read a lot of books and, obviously trying to expand my coaching palette to be able to help people in various, that have various aspirations on the mats. And, when you look at the mental side of coaching, and seeing how people respond to different things, it's a really big deal. Like, there's a lot to it. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's a real good correlation, and you see the professional athletes, like all these Olympians or again, professional athletes. A lot of them do have resources like that to have like a mental coach and so on that can really help them, jump over a hurdle here, or kind of maybe look at things a little differently, right? So yeah, it's a pretty cool tool.
Very neat.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else?
I'm just trying to think.
It's a lot. It's a lot to take in, but I think that I think it's awesome. The messages of finding the right path to get yourself to class. What is it you're trying to accomplish, and listening to your body, not giving up. If you are faced with illness, personal injury, things of that nature. And just talking about it, telling your story too. I mean, you talk about the Olympians and their mental coaches. Like, we can all be that to each other too,
100%.
right? Like,
Community is huge, right?
Yeah.
So like, if you have, and we're fortunate, we have. I mean, when you think about the big picture, like, your team, you're all growing together. You're all trying. What I like to see is people trying to grow together, support each other, get each other to the best place that you can be. Together. And obviously, individually, you have your own spin-offs from that, right? But it's a growth. Like you can't train jiu-jitsu by yourself. You can't sit in the basement here, and you can only do so many shrimps, right? Like like you need partners to train,
Exactly.
and you grow together, and you push each other, you elevate each other, and that's one good thing I'll say about our organization, like with a guy like Max, and we're so fortunate to have somebody like him, and thankfully John and Edgeguard, and those guys, connected us with Max, and he's such an inspiration individual. Like if you've watched his movie or anything about his life story, the adversity that man has faced is unbelievable, and to see what he's done with his life, and he's one of those people that just kind of embodies that. Let's raise each other up together, and let's So we're super fortunate to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think every time we've had done our podcast, it seems like it comes back every time to the morale of our club, and
Yeah.
just that is one thing that MXT really does, I think, stand strong in, is just the community, and just having a really good training environment and great people.
Yeah. The values. It's just living and breathing. It's its own
Oh, 100%.
like organism where it's right.
And I couldn't agree. And if you look at the community, most clubs are pretty good. Like I look at, our friends in Fredericton, and Dana and Melissa. And
Yes.
I look at friends in Moncton, and
PEI.
PEI, right? And Nova Scotia, like all these clubs, I mean, they all have their own chemistry. They all have their own, right? So it's pretty cool to see. And it looks like the people that are there, it seems like everybody is getting that, which is the whole goal here, right? So, keep up the great work in the Maritimes to these academies.
Yeah.
Doing a great job.
Thank you so much. We
Oh, my pleasure.
really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
your
me.
time and sharing your story. It's especially with these topics, is like you said, the stigma. It's so important to just keep being honest, keep putting your story out there, and supporting each other, and just to make this a better place.
100%. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.